Hello everybody and welcome back to Screen Stars and welcome to another of my classic film reviews. Now I realised the other day that with the imminent release of Rambo Last Blood, the final Rambo film, at least we assume it's the final Rambo film, I realised that I hadn't reviewed any of the Rambo films on this channel, so I thought leading up to the release of Rambo Last Blood I would do a review for each of the Rambo films that have been released so far. And the first one is of course First Blood, or as it's now called, Rambo First Blood. At the time it was just called First Blood, and then it was turned into a franchise, and the rest is history. And this was released in 1982. It was directed by Ted Kotcheff, stars Sylvester Stallone, obviously, Brian Dennehy and Richard Crenna, and based on a book by David Morrell. Now, in the actual original book, many of you will probably already know that the character of Rambo was supposed to die at the end of that book. He did die at the end of that book. But this film went through a lot of changes before it got to the screen. A lot of changes in the sense of writers, and a lot of changes in regards to actors who were going to play Rambo. And my understanding is that Sylvester Stallone was also brought on board to help with the script and the screenplay and all this kind of stuff. And the changes they made were essentially more palatable to audiences. And the big change was that Rambo lived at the end. And this film focuses on Sylvester Stallone's character, John Rambo, who is a Vietnam veteran who is a bit of a wanderer. He's wandering from place to place. He doesn't have a place in the world anymore. He's suffering from PTSD from the Vietnam War, and he's very, very scarred, and he's off to visit one of his old friends from his unit in Vietnam. When he gets there, he's very, very upset and disappointed to find out that he's actually died. His friend died from Agent Orange in the Vietnam War, and it killed him over there, and he died from cancer and stuff eventually once he got back to the US. So he heads off again, and he heads into this small town where Brian Dennehy is the sheriff. Now, Brian Dennehy does not take a liking to him. He's got an American flag on his shoulder, and he's in Canada. He looks homeless, and he thinks he's trouble. So he advises him to leave the town, and he offers him a lift to leave the town. Stallone doesn't take kindly to this. He heads off. As soon as he's dropped off by Brian Dennehy, he turns around and heads off back in the direction of his town. Takes exception to this. Teasel, the sheriff, arrests him for vagrancy and all sorts of other things, and he is treated very badly back at the police station by a lot of the deputies, and one in particular, and it essentially sparks his bad memories from the Vietnam War when he was captured and tortured by the Vietnamese, and he escapes from the prison, heads off into the hills, pursued by these deputies and the sheriff. There's a fantastic sequence where he takes them all out one at a time without killing any of them, and the only person he does kill at the beginning of this film, one of the deputies, was by accident. And then Richard Crenna, Troutman, turns up and warns everybody that in actual fact the person they're trying to capture and corner is basically a walking killing machine, and he's a Green Beret Vietnam veteran with many kills, confirmed kills, and he kind of warns them to back off and let him sneak away, and they'll be able to arrest him a couple of weeks down the line somewhere when everything's calmed down. But they're not having any of it, and this manhunt continues and escalates from there. Right, so I think a lot of people would agree that First Blood is an 80s classic in regards to an action film. It would probably make most people's top 10s action films of the 80s. It's a superbly made film. It really, really is, and Stallone was perfectly cast as John Rambo. If you take all of the sequels away that vary in quality, you can argue, and we just had First Blood, it would definitely be regarded as an all-time classic, an 80s classic. Now, because we've got all the sequels, it kind of dilutes the effectiveness of the first film, and the first film was just tremendous. It was really impactful. I remember seeing this when I was at school. Everybody was talking about it at school. going mad about this film First Blood, and when he were taking them all out in the forest and stuff. And when the first time I saw it, I was only a teenager, and it just blew me away. It was just incredible, this iconic character created by Stallone. And it has some emotional weight as well. The speech he gives at the end of this was just wonderful. The speech that Stallone gives about how he feels after the Vietnam War, how he was treated, how he's lost all his friends, there's nobody left, and he's on his own, and it's just wonderful, and it's really well delivered. And sometimes Stallone, I think these days a lot of people do respect him for his acting, but over the years, and some of that's his own fault with some of the films he's released, but he really is a very, very good actor, Sylvester Stallone, and he adds a lot of weight to this character of John Rambo. And this film is an undeniable 80s classic. I also really, really love Brian Dennehy in this film. Super reliable actor, and he's great in this film because he's kind of the bad guy, but it's a really big grey area, because ultimately, if you actually analyse it, the bad guy here is Stallone, who really crosses the line. John Rambo, yes, you could argue at the beginning he was so mistreated that he was pushed into what he did, but there's no real bad guy here. There is a real big grey area, and he plays that role fantastically well, Brian Dennehy. And Richard Crenna is fantastic as Troutman, who that role was fleshed out as the sequels progressed. So I have to say, 9 out of 10 for this film. It's an almost flawless action film, really well made, and definitely, in my opinion, the strongest of the Rambo franchise. I'm really looking forward to Rambo Last Blood, but before then, expect in the coming days more reviews for the sequels to the Rambo films. So thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, and of course I'll see you next time on Screen Stars.